So most of the authors I've interviewed over the last few years have been publishing books, sometimes anthologies. This month I interviewed a self-publishing author who uses his venue to publish a quarterly magazine full of original short stories written by him and other authors that he knows. So please join me in welcoming Ben Sheridan. Hey Ben, thank you for joining me on the show. Please tell me about what it is that you write and the work that you have developed as an author.
Hey Garrett. All right, so me myself, I have two kind of projects going. One is for me as a person, which is under Ben Sheridan Writing, and the other, our more flagship project, is Funemployment Press. And Funemployment Press so far has put out three quarterlies, which we're trying to do on a quarterly schedule, but that's insane. So now we just pull it all together and release it. And yeah, and we also have a tabletop RPG, which has recently come out in the last few months, which is based around bowling. Me, myself, I mostly write and release short stories either through the quarterlies themselves. I try to sneak in one every issue, or through the Cream Scene magazine has also released a few.
Funemployment Press is mostly for other indie authors trying to get their name out there, and you submit and you publish as a part of a magazine.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's more, it's like a, not a magazine, it's like hardbound and all that. Well, soft cover bound, but looks like a book. And yeah, it was just me and a few friends of mine, and we were deciding, we should probably just do this. And then we have, and it's gone really, really well so far.
Awesome.
And yeah, it's fun. You get to press gang every single person into buying a copy of the book for one reason or another. And yeah, it's really been a joy, and it's been great meeting people through it and talking to people and kind of finding a little community online.
So how did you get into writing? Was this something that you've always wanted to do, or was this like you just woke up one day and you're like, I need to put myself out there?
It's something I've always wanted to do for sure. I always liked reading when I was a kid. It took off for me big when I was about 7. And then, of course, naturally, once you read enough, you want to start writing a bit.
So obviously, science fiction has been an inspiration for you.
Mhm.
What are some other inspirations that you have drawn from as a writer and as a creator?
Fantasy, of course, some people read one, some people read the other, but I'm agnostic. If it's a good piece of literature, it's a good piece of literature. And personally, I would say kind of like surreal literature was big for me when I was younger. Like I never pronounced his name correctly, but Thomas Pynchon
Mm.
and Franz Kafka, they were huge. And then also when I was a little younger, not as young as that, I really got into like weird lit, I guess you'd call it, like China Miéville and like Michael Sisko and just a whole bunch of writing communities online where people weren't as nice as they are these days, but you kind of hone your craft on it.
So, what has been one of the hardest parts or one of the biggest challenges that you have faced in the creation of your work, whether it's your short stories or Funemployment Press?
Sitting down and actually doing it. Carving out the time, carving out the energy, and carving out the motivation.
Of
Yeah,
those three, time, energy, and motivation, which one was the hardest for you to carve out?
probably at the end of the day, energy. I took a bunch of creative writing classes in 2015 before doing boring computer stuff, which I do now as work. And then after college, right, you're working 10-hour days, you're working through your weekends, a million things happen. And then before you know it, at the end of the day, you're just exhausted. And life never really relents.
No.
It gets different. You have a kid, you have to keep working. And at the end of the day, sometimes you're just feeling a little too, burnt out or crisped up to get around to it. But it's carving out the time to at least read and hopefully write. That is a challenge, but you got to do it.
So, if you could give any advice to other would be authors, what would you say to them?
Read consistently, write consistently, and don't underestimate yourself. The problem I've had with motivation is I'm my own worst critic, of course, and I feel a lot of people are. And when I was done with a writing group in college, and I'd write things outside of that, and I would submit them, and I get rejection letter after rejection letter after rejection letter, and it's demoralizing. Of course, it is. It's demoralizing for anyone. But if you keep practicing and you keep working on it, eventually you're going to produce things that are tangibly good and people agree with that. So even if what you think now, what you think you're writing now is subpar, like just keep working at it and you're going to improve. The last several pieces I published as myself were actually like 8 to 10 years old, and I went through them with a fine editing pen that's been honed by years of experience and really sharpened them up and sent them off to editors, and people loved them, right? So if you stick with practicing and you stick with consistently, reading and writing, even things that you thought were subpar when you write them from your younger years, if you go through them when you're more experienced, often you'll find there's little gems in there.
Well, Ben, we're coming up to the last question. How can people get a hold of you? How can they get a hold of Funemployment Press or any other short stories that you have out there?
All right, so I keep meaning to set up a vocal, but I don't believe I've done it yet. And we're on Instagram as Fun Employment Press, and I personally am on Instagram as Ben BEN _Sheridan SHERIDAN _ writing. I assume there'll be links in the caption.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Ben, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks, Garrett. Appreciate it.
If you're interested in picking up copies of Ben's work or connect with him through social media, you can find those links down in the video description.